Chapter 1. The Ancient World. The ancient world is the destination of history's dream. Before human evolution and before the ancient world began, there was a human habitat called Earth. The ancient world involved not just humankind, but also her home of existence called Earth, divided into regions called continents. From about 300 to 200 million years ago, late Paleozoic era until the very late Triassic, the continent we now know as North America was contiguous with Africa, South America, and Europe. They all existed as a single continent called Pangaea. In 1912, German scientist Alfred Wegener proposed a theory he called continental drift. According to Wegener's theory, Earth's continents once formed a single, giant landmass, which he called Pangaea. Over millions of years, Pangaea slowly broke apart, eventually forming the continents as they are today. A continent is a large, continuous, discrete mass of land, ideally separated by expanse of water, one of Earth's 7 main divisions of land. The continents from largest to smallest are Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica, Europe, and Australia, including the entire islands associated with each. You can only board the vehicle of history to get to the destination of the ancient world. Evolution of the ancient world. The ancient world is the evolutionary period within the history of primates that birthed the emergence of Homo sapiens as a distinct species of the hominid family, which includes the great apes. The process involved the gradual development of traits such as human bipedalism and language, as well as interbreeding with other hominins, which indicate that human evolution was not linear but a web. The process of evolution involves a series of natural changes that cause species populations of different organisms to arise, adapt to the environment, and become extinct. All species or organisms have originated through the process of biological evolution. In animals that reproduce sexually, including humans, the term species refers to a group whose adult members regularly interbreed, resulting in fertile offspring, that is, offspring themselves capable of reproducing. Scientists classify each species with a unique, two-part scientific name. In this system, modern humans are classified as Homo sapiens. Human evolution birth human race. Human evolution gave birth to humankind, and humankind gave birth to human population. Over the ages, the human has grown into a global society that is categorized into races, a group of sentient beings, particularly people, distinguished by common ancestry, heritage or physical characteristics. In a layman's view, especially at first glance, race is about skin color and some other characteristics of people's appearance. A biological race theory would substantiate that view by classifying racial categories, e.g., Caucasoid, Negroid, and Mongoloid, based primarily upon such externally visible traits as skin color, hair color and texture, eye color and eye folds, features of the face including nose shape, the shape and size of the head and body, and the underlying skeleton. Genetic relationship of the 3 major races of man, Caucasoid, the white race, Negroid, the black race, and Mongoloid, the yellow race, was studied. All European populations are genetically close to one another except the Lapps, whereas many African, Oceanian, and Amerindian tribes show large extents of genetic differentiation. The major cause for this differentiation seems to be the bottleneck effect, an extreme example of genetic drift that happens when the size of a population severely reduced due to environmental events such as famines, earthquakes, floods, fires, diseases, disastrous human activities etc. The Polynesians, Micronesians, and Indonesians are more closely related to the Asian Mongoloids, yellow race, than to the Australoids in Australia and New Guinea. The Australoids are black aborigines of yellow race descents, westernized to become white, therefore, a mixed race. There are also indications that migration played an important role in forming the current genetic relationships among human races. While the white race represents the Western world, the yellow race represents the Eastern world, and the black race represents the Third world. Race is one of the defining, and often polarizing, features of world society. Racial issues permeate politics, business, education, and other aspects of our social life. Naturally, they are most important to diversity management. Recognition of some basic divisions of mankind by the public and the government, while different from early biological classification by rejecting clear-cut categories, has been informed by and also helped to perpetuate this type of common-sense views. A race is a categorization of humans based on shared physical or social qualities into groups generally viewed as distinct within a given society. The term came into common usage during the 1500s, when it was used to refer to groups of various kinds, including those characterized by close kinship relations. By the 17th century, the term began to refer to physical, phenotypical traits, and then later to national affiliations. Modern science regards race as a social construct, an identity which is assigned based on rules made by society. Human race birth human history. The human race is a classification of her characteristics. These characteristics, when put together with her past activities, form her history. Therefore, history, which is the study of the past using sources such as archaeology and written records, is a function of human activities and characteristics, humanity. It isn't just the study of others, as the people you may learn about may have lived decades or even centuries ago, but their actions directly affect how we live our lives today. The human history timeline can be classified according to ages BC or BCE and AD or CE, millennium, 1000 years, centuries, 100 years, jubilee, 50 years, decades, 10 years, etc. BC, BCE, and AD, CE, ages timeline. While AD stands for Anno Domini and is a label for numbering years after Christ was born, BC means before Christ. The year Christ was born is considered AD 1, and the year before Christ was born is 1 BC. Also, AD is referred to as CE, Common Era, and BC referred to as BCE, before Common Era. E.g., while the Iron Age ended 550 BC, before Christ was born, the Middle Age began 500 AD, after Christ was born. Often dates will be preceded with A.C. or ca. These are abbreviations of the Latin word circa, which means around, or approximately. We use this before a date to indicate that we do not know exactly when something happened, so, c. 400 BCE, means approximately 400 years before the Common Era, BC, before Christ. Ancient Age Prehistory. Ancient age is the aggregate of past events from the beginning of writing and recorded human history and extending as far as late antiquity. The span of recorded history is roughly 5,000 years, beginning with the Sumerian cuneiform script. The history of ancient age covers all continents inhabited by humans in the period 3000 BCE to 500 CE. Prehistory is the period of human history between the use of the first stone tools by hominins c. 3.3 million years ago and the beginning of recorded history with the invention of writing systems. Before written history, most of our knowledge of that period comes from the work of archaeologists. Prehistory is split into three main categories of ages, based on developing technologies and the materials the early human used: stone, bronze and iron. The start and end of the three ages varies between world regions. The Stone Age began about 2.6 million years ago, when researchers found the earliest evidence of humans using stone tools, and lasted until about 3300 BC when the Bronze Age began. In many regions the Bronze Age is generally considered to begin a few centuries prior to 3000 BCE, while the end of the Iron Age varies from the early 1st millennium BCE in some regions to the late 1st millennium CE in others. The Stone Age. The Stone Age is split into three separate periods: Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic. The earliest part of the Stone Age is called the Paleolithic. Paleolithic people were nomadic. This means they were always moving with their families. They gathered food, firewood, and materials for tools, cloths and shelter, all from their surroundings. Their diet was made up mainly from animals' meat, fruits and plants. The animals they ate included wild horse, red deer, Arctic hare, reindeer, wild cattle, lynx and red fox. They used every part of the animal to help them live: the meat for food, fur and skin for cloths and bones for marrow and glue. Their discovering of fire also helped them stay warm, cook and frighten away dangerous animals. Mesolithic is the middle part of the Stone Age. As the climate continued to warm up, sea level rose and this led to Britain becoming an island. Before this, there was no sea between Britain and Europe. You would have been able to walk from Britain to France. Mesolithic people moved around the countryside following animal herds and finding the best flint which could be used for tool making. They traveled in groups of about 10 to 40 people and hunted animals in woodlands. Neolithic, around 4000 BC, people begin to stop moving around, and start to live in one place permanently. They began to farm crops like spelt and wheat, and kept animals like goat and sheep. More land was needed for farming, and lots of woodlands were cut down to make space. Flint was still used to make tools, and flint mines were used to find the best flint deep underground. It was during the Neolithic that people started using pottery in Britain, although it had already been used in Greece for 2,500 years. Items made from pottery were used for cooking and storing food. The oldest pottery known was found at an archaeological site in Japan. Fragments of clay containers used in food preparation at the site may be up to 16,500 years old. The Bronze Age. The Bronze Age comes after the Stone Age, but before the Iron Age. The Bronze Age was the time from around 2000 BC to 700 BC when people used bronze. In the Stone Age, flint was shaped and used as tools and weapons, but in the Bronze Age, stone was gradually replaced by bronze. The Bronze Age marked the first time humans started to work with metal. Bronze tools and weapons soon replaced earlier stone versions. Ancient Sumerians in the Middle East may have been the first people to enter the Bronze Age. Humans made many technological advances during the Bronze Age, including the first writing systems and the invention of the wheel. In the Middle East and parts of Asia, the Bronze Age lasted from roughly 3300 to 1200 BC, ending abruptly with the near-simultaneous collapse of several prominent Bronze Age civilizations. Different human societies entered the Bronze Age at different times. Civilizations in Greece began working with bronze before 3000 BC, while the British Isles and China entered the Bronze Age much later, around 1900 BC and 1600 BC respectively. The Bronze Age was marked by the rise of states or kingdoms, large-scale societies joined under a central government by a powerful ruler. Bronze Age states interacted with each other through trade, warfare, migration and the spread of ideas. Prominent Bronze Age kingdoms included Sumer and Babylonia in Mesopotamia and Athens in ancient Greece. The Bronze Age ended around 1200 BC when humans began to forge an even stronger metal, iron. The Iron Age. The Iron Age was a period in human history that started between 1200 BC and 600 BC, depending on the region, and followed the Stone Age and Bronze Age. During the Iron Age, people across much of Europe, Asia and parts of Africa began making tools and weapons from iron and steel. For some societies, including ancient Greece, the start of the Iron Age was accompanied by a period of cultural decline. Humans may have smelted iron sporadically throughout the Bronze Age, though they likely saw iron as an inferior metal. Iron tools and weapons weren't as hard or durable as their bronze counterparts. The use of iron became more widespread after people learned how to make steel, a much harder metal, by heating iron with carbon. The Hittites, who lived during the Bronze Age in what is now Turkey, may have been the first to make steel. The cause for the collapse of these Bronze Age kingdoms remains unclear. Archaeological evidence suggests a succession of severe droughts in the eastern Mediterranean region over a 150-year period from 1250 to 1100 BC likely figured prominently in the collapse. Earthquakes, famine, socio-political unrest and invasion by nomadic tribes may also have played a role. Some experts believe that a disruption in trade routes may have caused shortages of the copper or tin used to make bronze around this time. Metalsmiths, as a result, may have turned to iron as an alternative. Many scholars place the end of the Iron Age at around 550 BC, when Herodotus, the father of history, began writing the histories, though the end date varies by region. In Scandinavia, it ended closer to 800 AD with the rise of the Vikings. In Western and Central Europe, the end of the Iron Age is typically identified as coinciding with the Roman conquest during the 1st century BC, 100 years before Christ. The Classical Age. The Classical Age or Antiquity is the period of cultural history between the 8th century BC and the 6th century AD centered on the Mediterranean Sea, comprising the interlocking civilizations of ancient Greece and ancient Rome known as the Greco-Roman world. Commonly known as Alexander the Great, was a king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon. He succeeded his father Philip XI to the throne in 336 BC at the age of 20, and spent most of his ruling years conducting a lengthy military campaign throughout Western Asia and Egypt. By the age of 30, he had created one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Greece to northwestern India. He was undefeated in battle and is widely considered to be one of history's greatest and most successful military commanders. Alexander the Great was taught by Aristotle, an ancient Greek philosopher, logician and scientist 382 to 322 BCE, while Aristotle was a student of Plato, a Greek philosopher, 427 to 347 BC, and Plato a follower of Socrates, a classical Greek philosopher, c. 470 to 399 BCE. Ancient Greek civilization, the period following Mycenaean civilization, which ended about 1200 BCE, to the death of Alexander the Great, in 323 BCE. It was a period of political, philosophical, artistic, and scientific achievements that formed a legacy with unparalleled influence on Western civilization. Ancient Greek history is conventionally broken down into three periods: archaic, classical, and Hellenistic. The Greeks called their land Hellas and themselves Hellenes. It was the Romans who called them Greeks Greci, and that is the name by which they became known. Beginning in the 8th century BC, ancient Rome grew from a small town on central Italy's Tiber River into an empire that at its peak encompassed most of continental Europe, Britain, much of Western Asia, northern Africa and the Mediterranean islands. Among the many legacies of Roman dominance are the widespread use of the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese and Romanian, derived from Latin, the modern Western alphabet and calendar and the emergence of Christianity as a major world religion. In the 1st century BC, was a Roman general and statesman, a member of the first triumvirate, called Gaius Julius Caesar. He led the Roman armies in the Gallic Wars before defeating his political rival Pompey in a civil war, and subsequently became dictator from 49 BC until his assassination in 44 BC. He played a critical role in the events that led to the demise of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. After 450 years as a republic, Rome became an empire in the wake of Julius Caesar's rise and fall in the 1st century BC. The long and triumphant reign of its first emperor, Augustus, began a golden age of peace and prosperity. By contrast, the Roman Empire's decline and fall by the 5th century AD was one of the most dramatic implosions in the history of human civilization. The Roman Empire was founded when Augustus Caesar proclaimed himself the first emperor of Rome in 31 BC, after the assassination of Julius Caesar, and reigned from 27 BC until his death in AD 14. The empire came to an end with the fall of Constantinople in 1453 AD. The Ottomans ended the Byzantine Empire with the conquest of Constantinople in 1453 by Mehmed the Conqueror. The Byzantine Empire, also referred to as the Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantium, was the continuation of the Roman Empire in its eastern provinces during the late Antiquity and the Middle Ages, after the Roman Empire has been divided into an eastern and a western half in 285 CE by the Emperor Diocletian. Between 1 and 500 AD, much of the territory of Western and Central Europe is subject to Roman rule, and lands outside Roman dominion are still influenced by Roman goods and practices. In the early part of the period, the stability of the empire encourages stability on its borders. The subsequent weakening of Roman power allows neighboring Franks, Goths, and other tribal groups to settle and ultimately control the empire's western provinces. 42 AD, Christianity first spread in the predominantly Greek-speaking eastern half of the Roman Empire. The apostles traveled extensively throughout the empire, establishing communities in major cities and regions, with the first community appearing in Jerusalem, followed by communities in Antioch, Ethiopia and others. Early growth also occurred in the two political centers of Rome and Greece, as well as in Byzantium, later known as Constantinople. 60s AD, Germanic peoples, whom the Romans call barbarians, revolt against Roman rule. Queen Boudica leads one uprising in Britain in 61 AD, and Claudius Civilis another in the present-day Netherlands in 69 AD. 100 AD, a leap year starting on Wednesday of the Julian calendar. In the Roman Empire, it was sometimes referred to as year 853 ab urbe candida, i.e. 853 years since the founding of Rome in 753 BC. The denomination AD 100 for this year has been used since the early medieval period, when the Anno Domini calendar era became the prevalent method in Europe for naming year. 160 to 180 AD, conflict between Roman armies and Germanic tribes on the borders of the empire increases, notably in Dacia, in present-day Romania. There, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius leads the Roman army into the Great Marcomannic Wars against the Marcomanni and the Quadi. 240 to 280 AD, the Roman Empire is regularly attacked by Germanic peoples such as the Goths on the Danube and the Alamans and Franks on the Rhine. This insecurity leads to a succession of soldier emperors who rule for only a few years before being overthrown by a competitor. 330 AD, Emperor Constantine founds the new capital of the Roman Empire on the existing site of the ancient Greek city Byzantium. Byzantium was renamed Constantinople and it would become the capital of the Byzantine Empire. 4th century AD, internal conflict and ongoing pressure on the borders of the Roman Empire led to the incorporation of barbarian leaders and their followers into the Roman army. Mass migrations of Germanic tribes north of the Roman Empire disrupt the rhythm of life in the provinces and create widespread disorder. In the face of uncertainty and chaos, patrons lose interest in civic building efforts and other architectural endeavors. Artists invest time and precious materials in small, portable works. 430 AD, Rome eventually collapsed under the weight of its own bloated empire, losing its provinces one by one, Britain around 410, Spain and northern Africa by 430. Attila and his brutal Huns invaded Gaul and Italy around 450, further shaking the foundations of the empire. In September 476, a Germanic prince named Odovacar won control of the Roman army in Italy. After deposing the last Western emperor Romulus Augustus, Odovacar's troops proclaimed him king of Italy, bringing an ignoble end to the long, tumultuous history of ancient Rome. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was complete. The Middle Age medieval. The Middle Age cuts across the periods between 500 to 1000 AD, and 1000 to 1500 AD. Year 500 is traditionally considered by the Europeans to be the beginning of the Middle Ages or Dark Ages. In the history of Europe, the Middle Ages or medieval period lasted approximately from the late 5th to the late 15th centuries, similar to the post-classical period of global history. It began with the fall of the Western Roman Empire and transitioned into the Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. The Middle Ages is the middle period of the three traditional divisions of Western history: classical antiquity, the medieval period, and the modern period. The medieval period is itself subdivided into the early, high and late Middle Ages. Population decline, counter-urbanization, the collapse of centralized authority, invasions, and mass migrations of tribes, which had begun in late antiquity, continued into the early Middle Ages. Early Middle Ages, the large-scale movements of the migration period, including various Germanic peoples, formed new kingdoms in what remained of the Western Roman Empire. In the 7th century, North Africa and the Middle East, most recently part of the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Empire, came under the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate, an Islamic empire, after conquest by Muhammad's successors. Although there were substantial changes in society and political structures, the break with classical antiquity was not complete. The still sizable Byzantine Empire, Rome's direct continuation, survived in the eastern Mediterranean and remained a major power. Secular law was advanced greatly by the Code of Justinian. In the West, most kingdoms incorporated extant Roman institutions, while new bishoprics and monasteries were founded as Christianity expanded in Europe. The Franks, under the Carolingian dynasty, briefly established the Carolingian Empire during the later 8th and early 9th centuries. It covered much of Western Europe but later succumbed to the pressures of internal civil wars combined with external invasions, Vikings from the north, Magyars from the east, and Saracens from the south. Charlemagne or Charles the Great, a member of the Carolingian dynasty, was king of the Franks from 768, king of the Lombards from 774, and the first emperor of the Romans from 800. Charlemagne succeeded in uniting the majority of Western and Central Europe and was the first recognized emperor to rule from Western Europe after the fall of the Western Roman Empire around 3 centuries earlier. The High Middle Ages, which began after 1000, saw the population of Europe increased greatly as technological and agricultural innovations allowed trade to flourish, and the medieval warm period climate change allowed crop yields to increase. Manorialism, the organization of peasants into villages that owed rent and labor services to the nobles, and feudalism, the political structure whereby knights and lower-status nobles owed military service to their overlords in return for the right to rent from lands and manors, were two of the ways society was organized in the High Middle Ages. The expanded Frankish state that Charlemagne founded was the Carolingian Empire. Charlemagne has been called the father of Europe, as he united most of Western Europe for the first time since the classical era of the Roman Empire, as well as uniting parts of Europe that had never been under Frankish or Roman rule. His reign spurred the Carolingian Renaissance, a period of energetic cultural and intellectual activity within the Western Church. The Eastern Orthodox Church viewed Charlemagne less favorably, due to his support of the Filioque and the Pope's preference of him as emperor over the Byzantine Empire's first female monarch, Irene of Athens. These and other disputes led to the eventual split of Rome and Constantinople in the Great Schism of 1054, the split between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. The Crusades, which began in 1095, were military attempts by Western European Christians to regain control of the Holy Land from Muslims, and also contributed to the expansion of Latin Christendom in the Baltic region and the Iberian Peninsula. Today, almost 2.56 billion people are identified as Christians all over the globe. The likes of Vatican City is 100% Christian, the likes of Romania, Papua New Guinea, Tonga are 99% Christian countries. The late Middle Ages was marked by difficulties and calamities including famine, plague, and war, which significantly diminished the population of Europe. Between 1347 and 1350, the Black Death killed about a third of Europeans. Controversy, heresy, and the Western Schism within the Catholic Church paralleled the interstate conflict, civil strife, and peasant revolts that occurred in the kingdoms. Europe did indeed suffer disasters of war, famine, and pestilence in the 14th century, but many of the underlying social, intellectual, and political structures remained intact. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Europe experienced an intellectual and economic revival, conventionally called the Renaissance, that laid the foundation for the subsequent expansion of European culture throughout the world, through exploration and colonization. Is the ancient world all humanity needed to survive? If yes, then the world would have been a better place for all. Humanity would have preferred the ancient world to her dream world. The dream world. A world whose civilization is not a function of corruption. In a bid for a better humanity, the ancient world embraced civilization as a means to her dream world. But has civilization done more good than harm? When civilization makes the human thought more negative than positive, the society will only grow in corruption. A civilization which corruption is the bedrock has informed the Western world to abandon morality for intellectuality, has informed the Africans to abandon handicraft for witchcraft. A corrupt institutionalized society births a dilapidated humanity with poor moral values and cruelty, humanity without dignity. It simply means the societal systems have been corrupted, just like the computer system. It will really need formatting. But then, it is one thing to lose hope on the system, and it is another thing to lose hope on the society. If the system must not give you a society that is an abandoned object, you must make the society a project that cannot be abandoned. So, if the system must not make you a coward, you must contribute for the society to move forward. A world whose economy will not plague like an epidemic. The economy is the vehicle that drives a nation to her destination, and government policy is the fuel the economy needs to drive. It can only take good policies for the economy to drive to its destination, and it can only take bad policies for the economy to get stranded in its journey to destination. Therefore, bad policy is the most dangerous and contagious disease that can infest and plague any nation. It can cripple the economy to an unmovable state, yet not stable. Bad policy is the empowerment corruption needs to frustrate a nation to underdevelopment, and it's the doom poverty needs to downturn an economy not to boom. Evaluation exercise. 1. What are the 7 continents from the largest in size to the smallest? 2. Explain Homo sapiens, and what are the traits of human evolution? 3. Explain the human race and its categories. 4. Explain the impact of archaeologists on the prehistory era. 5. Explain the different categories of prehistory ages. 6. What is classical age? And how is it different from the prehistory age? 7. When did the Iron Age begin? And who is known as the father of history? 8. Who are the following: Alexander the Great, Gaius Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, Emperor Diocletian, and Emperor Constantine? 9. What is medieval age? And how is it different from the classical age? 10. What age and period did the Western Roman Empire fall? And which emperor reigned after its fall? 11. What are the 3 divisions of Western history? And what are the 3 divisions of the Middle Age? 12. Which empire took over from the Roman Empire? And what was its capital? 13. Explain the Great Schism of 1054. And who is known as the father of Europe? 14. What century did Islam took over North Africa and the Middle East? State 3 countries that are 100% and 99% Christians. 15. What century and in what age did the Black Death killed about a third of Europeans?